Shema everyone, it's JonnyVR here back with another Doctor Who review. This episode is The Story and the Engine, and it's the 5th episode of Season 2. And as always, the first part of this review will be spoiler free, and then I'll go into more details of the story afterwards, after I give you the spoiler warning. So, what do I think of The Story and the Engine? I think this episode was built up quite a lot in the first sort of half of the episode, or maybe even more. I feel like the setting for this episode is very interesting and vibrant, and it's one that isn't usually used a lot in Doctor Who. I think its characters are again interesting in their own way, and they're interesting because of what their job is in the story. It has very interesting setup that I feel like it was so much setup that it didn't quite allow itself enough time to pull all together. I think I feel like it needed more time and more backstory. Otherwise, it does work on its own as an episode. But I feel like up until a point, it was building that suspense, building that mystery, getting to the point where it was going to tell us more things, and then once it did, it kind of fast sped to the end, or the conclusion, or the save the day maybe. But I think for the most part, this episode was kind of a quiet one. I think it very slowly builds up this story, this episode. I think that I think that it's pretty much it was a slow burn. I thought that Lucky Day was a slow burn last week, but I feel like this one was more of a slow burn. I think it has interesting aspects to the story. It definitely needs a rewatch to take in sort of a lot of what's going on. I feel like some aspects of the story were either a part of bigger things that we've come to learn from this series and the previous one, but also not. So it's a bit like it needs more time to think and to uncover things that are going on in the story. It was mysterious. I did like its mystery, and it did make me think that it was going to be kind of more like important or more influential. It did make me feel like it was going to be more like sort of groundbreaking in regards to like Doctor Who mythology, but it was not. It kind of fits in on its own, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it did feel like a very closed episode, like small in scale compared to, like, say for example, other episodes this season or next week's episode, which again looks like it. So it's one to take a little bit back, and go for it. I think it was a great set, and I think that there was a lot of good things about it. The music, the characters, and the acting was all amazing. But I feel like the story in itself was like kind of lacking that part of the backstory that makes us think, oh, okay, something is this is really serious. But I did enjoy it, and the production quality was good. So I can't really go into much more without telling any spoilers. So here's your spoiler warning. So pretty much in the pre-titles, you have Omo, who's telling the story of how he met the Doctor, And this, interestingly, was the prequel story that was released on the BBC website. So I was reading this yesterday, um, and he gives kind of a summary of the story here. So in the story is set when he's small, he's set in 1965, and now this is set in 2019. Now, it sort of establishes very early on in the episode that there's this red and green light that that like switches on and off, like as they tell, as he was telling the story, and you have um, the barber as well, who we'll get into a bit later. So after the pre-titles, you have like the Doctor landing in Lagos, Nigeria. Um, Again with the Vindicator, because again, like they need to get Belinda home, but that's again all the thing about the story arc this season. Like I feel like at this point, um, more than halfway through the season and almost coming up to the finale, the storyline has been, the overall series arc has kind of just been reduced to, you need to get me home, and but we need to land to do that. It's not like, I feel like the conflict that is seen with Belinda and the Doctor in earlier episodes has kind of just been reduced to, you need to get me home, which is what we always need to begin with. It's not like she's like doing anything to to speed this up, or causing any more problems for the Doctor like it is in earlier episodes, to try and get this sorted. So there's an interesting scene why the Doctor goes to this particular barber shop, and it's because it touches on his regeneration, and how it's the first time like he's had this uh, body, and this is where he feels accepted. I thought it was again very interesting, very nice. But when he arrives, he sees like missing posters, and has the people in the barber shop on missing posters. Again, kind of similar to the missing person story in Lex. But it's here they are all stuck in the barbershop. He goes in, and then he finds them all there, and they're telling stories, and the hair is growing as after they tell stories, because everything is connected. So at this point, the story primarily becomes just this, which is what is in the pre-titles. Like, people sit down, they tell the story, and this gives power to the story engine. And then the hair grows as well, and this is like, it feels to me like a little, like very small, like, because the majority of the episode is then within this tiny barbershop room, as people sit down and tell stories and things like that. And the Doctor is one of them. Other characters also do. Has this window in the shop that kind of portrays the stories, and at times has some like very nice artwork that to represent what's being told in the story. Other times it becomes like a flashback scene. Like, for example, Belinda appears as Belinda before she meets the Doctor. Again, in that flashback, you just see Mrs. Flood. Nothing that we haven't seen before. She just pops up. Nothing new about her. And again, I feel like this is something that has been actually in a few episodes now, that we said, Rusty always said that it was a slow burn. We would slowly learn more about her, but I feel like we're not learning anything about her. I feel like she's just appearing for the sake of appearing, and it's coming to the finale. So I guess we're just gonna find out as it is. So yeah, pretty much this is it for a long period of the episode. As people tell stories, the end, like the light goes green, they power up the engine, and everything is connected to the barber. So like at one point it said that, like, his clippers, his the barber shop, like shawl, his hair, like everything is connected to the Barber, the stories. So it kind of builds this mystery of like, who is this Barber? Why they keep referring to the Barber? And I thought they had every chance in the story to kind of add something really big to the mythology, like of the world, like the lore, because like he's called the Barber instead of like maybe the Doctor. He has like this spaceship that is apparently bigger on the inside. Um, I did wonder whether they were going to take this route, but as it happens, when he's talking about who he is, he's gone by many names. Apparently, he has I think the most one that people will know is Loki. So he says he's Loki, but apparently he's lying, and he's the one behind them all. So like he's the one behind the stories. Um, but the gods who like he is the one telling stories of they basically they don't credit his work, and he's kind of been forgotten, and he wants to take revenge on the gods. So what I think was interesting about this is that it was interesting like to have this different character, um these legendary mythological characters sort of represented in this one person. But I was like, it's really like in these last two seasons, as the audience, we kind of have been trained to look for the idea of these godlike beings, like for a godlike episode. Like you've had many so far, where when we start talking about like gods, and you think the toy maker, you think of Maestro, you think of Sutek, and you think of now Lux. So whenever they start talking about gods, you start thinking about like, oh, this is going to be an episode that has like some crazy component to it. But as it happens, like this is not. It's kind of like a very quiet story. He's like, and from what I gather, him and the pantheon of gods that we've been seeing so much of are not actually connected. Um, he's kind of like a storyteller, and he wants revenge on the gods, but not the pantheon of gods. As far as I'm aware, I don't think like I feel like if it was connected, they would mention specifically he wants revenge on the gods, like you know in the pantheon. So from what I gather, like this is where like this the mystery in the story that was built up wasn't actually fully realized or explained entirely. Like he's talking about gods, and there's like no connection to the gods that we've been seeing explained. Like even if there was a line in there that said like, oh, or like the Doctor had said like, oh, I know the gods, like like which he has at some point. He's talking about these gods. He's like, I drank with Dionysius. You know, he's telling the story that like he's not those gods because he's met those gods, but there's no connection to like, oh, and there's these other gods, the gods that play games, and you're not, there's no connection to that. I feel like there should have been at least a little connection just to fully establish that actually this Barber and the gods that he has beef with is not the pantheon of gods, but it's just these gods in the story that he kind of is behind. So yeah, and basically these gods, they kick him out of the story and leave him. They take control of the story engine. Like I feel like this is like if he's the one behind the stories or the myths, like now the myths have taken their own own form, and he's kind of just forgotten, and he wants the credit for that. And they said they have the story engine powered without him, or the Nexus rather, the World Wide Web, this connected interweaving story. See, like there's so much in this episode, like so much exposition, so much talking. Like this is a big episode outside of the barbershop, but the only way they can do it is by talking about it and telling you about it within the barbershop and showing a few shots of this web with this big spider, which is the story engine, walking along it. So I feel like it it suffers a little bit with the amount of story that it has in this small barbershop room. Um, what I what I really liked about this episode is the cameo of the fugitive doctor. I was not expecting that, but it fits perfectly, and I think that it really ties together this era with the previous era. Like, if I did feel like sometimes the 13th Doctor era is kind of disconnected and on its own. So now that they have a fugitive doctor cameo, it kind of ties it closely in, um, which I like. Because again, apparently this character of Abby was refused to travel with the fugitive doctor, but then the fugitive doctor was the fugitive doctor, was busy and dangerous, like, so it makes sense. So again, like, there's a lot in here, like this Abby character. She's also with the barber. She has some level of control over what's going on, but kind of, you have to tell the backstory of the barber. You have to tell the backstory of her. It's a lot of exposition in one room. However, she does end up helping the doctor. I think this is very nice way of bringing in like culture to the episode. So the story of the hair and the map in the hair that she does for the doctor is then a map through this maze in the barber shop. So this is kind of the conclusion of the episode. Belinda also appears at one point. She was in the TARDIS. She comes through, and now she's with the doctor in the barber shop. And basically, I feel like up until this point, it was a lot of talking in the barber shop, a lot of exposition, a lot of stories, a lot of trying to figure out what everyone's motives are, who everyone is, and then at this point, he has the map, and they leave. Like, they go through this network of tunnels, which he has the map for, leading to the heart of the story engine. And it's at this point where he kind of just overloads it with stories, like, or takes control of it with his story. So he tells, short stories about him and his life and death, and like how his body is a barbershop because it has all these people inside it, and then it has like the flashbacks of all the previous doctors, which is again, in this has been done in Doctor Who many times. I always like to see it. And kind of, this is it, like, it overloads the engine. And yeah, I feel like this was it. Like, everyone escapes the barbershop then, and the spider explodes. So I feel like, on one hand, this is fine, like, as a conclusion. On the other hand, I feel like it's a quick conclusion, like, to an episode that was mostly held in the barbershop room, and was mostly like talking and exposition and building mystery, and then they kind of concluded it like this way. I did think it was sad that they showed this shot of the exploding spider in some of the promotional materials. So kind of like, we already knew that was going to happen from a trailer. So I feel like what should have been most important is telling more of the backstory, and or making more clear establishments of what is going on here and why the stories are important, and like, what are the stakes here, rather than this barber's revenge on the gods that sort of took life from his story. So yeah, I think that's all. Basically, overall, I like the episode. I think it's an interesting one. I have this feeling of mystery is interesting. I have to watch it like more times to get more understanding of who these characters are and what we know about them. I think that the cast was overall excellently acted, and but I did feel like it was small in scale compared to other episodes we have had this season and will have this season. I think it is likely to be the smallest one. And yeah, I feel like there should have been a few more distinguishing like parts of the story, so we actually know a bit better the differences between what's going on here with what's happened previously. And yeah, I think it was fine enough in itself as a standalone episode. I just wasn't expecting it to be so much of a standalone episode. But I like it. I think overall I'm going to give it a 7 because it's well put together, it's beautifully acted, but it kind of spends a lot of its time building up in a small space, a lot of exposition, and then kind of concludes fairly quickly. And I think that I think it maybe needed a bit more, or maybe a bit less exposition, or a bit more targeted exposition. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 7. So let me know what you think. Post comments down below. I'd love to chat about the episode. Let me know what you're excited about this season. Any theories you have, pop it all down below. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next week for another review. Bye.